Hey everyone, and welcome to Building SaaS on AWS, the flagship show for SaaS here on Twitch. My name is Gunnar Grosch. I'm a developer advocate at AWS, and if you're building or planning to build a SaaS product, this is really the show for you. What we do here is we deep dive into SaaS-specific topics so you can learn more about building SaaS on AWS. But it's not only me on this show. I bring on exciting AWS or external experts in the SaaS topic so you can learn more about it. And this week, I'm happy to be joined by Aviad from Frontegg and my colleague Alex from AWS SaaS Factory. So welcome to the show, both of you.
Thanks, Gunnar. Thanks for having us.
And well, let's start with a quick round of introduction, maybe. Aviad, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Aviad. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Frontegg, a user management platform, which we can talk a little bit about soon.
Thank you, and welcome to the show. Alex, we lost you for a second there, but you're back.
Yeah, it's a fast recovery. So hi, everyone. I'm Alex. As Gunnar mentioned, I'm from the SaaS Factory team and a solutions architect working with customers such as Aviad.
So if you're a regular to the show, you know that we dive deep into a specific topic on each show. And this week, the topic is user management for business-to-business SaaS applications using Frontegg. And well, Aviad, then maybe you can tell us a bit about Frontegg to begin with.
Sure. So Frontegg is a 3 years old startup based in Tel Aviv, Israel, and San Francisco. We kind of split around 2 girls. And as I mentioned, we are dealing with user management. So taking like the entire spectrum from authentication and everything around account management, which we're gonna see and cover. We were founded 3 years ago. Basically, my amazing co-founder, Sagi, who is the CEO of the company, and myself, we met a few years before that in Checkpoint, one of the largest cybersecurity companies in Israel and out there, where we had the privilege of leading and managing the entire SaaS infrastructure for the entire company. And a few years later, we kind of understood that the problem that we were solving for Checkpoint is kind of more abroad, and every startup and every company are trying basically to innovate, having like some obstacles in the way and we chose to focus on the user management spectrum and basically to solve this entire problem. So we're around 55 employees, as I mentioned, spread over these 2 years.
And what would you say brought you to solving that specific problem then?
Yeah, so I'm going to be 41 next month. So I have a lot of experience like coding and managing technology. And if there is one repetitive thing that happened for me like throughout my career, and I spent like my career dealing with a lot of companies and a lot of different products, is that I had to build like repetitive stuff all over again. So, and I think like, you know, every product and every project that I had to build or manage, especially over the last 10 years, where, you know, we see like the web renovation and everything is going towards SaaS and everything is going towards web. Basically, I found myself doing the same stuff over again, like dealing with building my login screen, building my invite forms, building my multi-factor authentication. SSO became more and more popular. And some of the use cases, I found myself basically, you know, writing down pieces of code that I know that I will have to take to the next company that I'm using. And every company is a bit different and every use case is a bit different, but still most of the things are very repetitive. So then when we founded Frontegg, we said, you know, developers should focus on what really matters. And when you set up a new project or when you set up a new company, you should focus on what really matters. And that's what basically what differentiates you from the other products in the market. And this is why we are trying to solve the user management so developers can focus on innovation rather than building this stuff again.
And Alex, maybe you can chime in here. Is that typically something you're seeing with SaaS builders, that they all start off with solving those same problems around user management?
Yeah, definitely. That's often we call it part of a control plane of SaaS applications. If we think about SaaS applications, two major planes, application plane and control plane. So application plane is where usually the business functionality that Aviad referred to lives, right? What the product does, how it's built, and etc., how it helps to achieve business goals. And the control plane is essentially all those shared services, such as, for example, user management, onboarding, etc. And it's definitely, we see, kind of repeats itself as customers build and innovate new SaaS products and offerings.
And Aviad, then, who are the target customers for Frontegg?
So obviously, we are trying to focus on the B2B space, or essentially every company that is selling B2B products, SaaS products, will be a natural customer for Frontegg, because we kind of try to build everything as self-service. Alex mentioned control plane. Control plane is, happens in every B2B product today, where users are inviting another users and controlling their permission and authorization. So we kind of try to build a product that is natural for every B2B customer out there. So we have cybersecurity companies. Any enterprise-facing customer is a natural customer for Frontegg. And obviously, eventually, if you are early stage, or even if you are far along the way and you are doing like your second round of that kind of stuff, so you're a natural customer for Frontegg.
Does that also mean that you don't have business to consumer customers, or is it just a main focus?
So it's funny because the world today kind of combines, right, with the PLG motion, that you have a B2C, we call them, customer signs up, but then they're automatically migrating to being a B2B customers, because they start inviting another user, and then they're forming groups or tenants, as we call them on a technical level. So the world is kind of combined. So we have several B2C customers as well, who are bringing on millions of users. And then on the B2B, we see less users, but more functionality on the product. So this is kind of where it plays out. I think like the border between a B2C and B2B today kind of shifts. Look at GitHub, right? You sign up, you have a repository, but then you start collaborating with another users, and then you are forming different groups. We see it with every collaboration tool out there.
And we haven't really touched that much on business to business previously in this Building SaaS on AWS series. So maybe you can talk a bit about what some use cases that are specific to B2B SaaS, what those are.
Yeah, sure. So when we talk about business to business, it's very easy to understand it, because if you talk about B2C, it's very easy. The user authenticates, and that is it. On B2B use cases, most of the time there are groups of users interacting with each other, sharing the same data over the same instance or tenant of the application. And then it means that on top of what we call an authentication layer, you need to build different products or different features and capabilities to support these use cases. For example, one of the most common use cases that we see is invite flows, right? So you are logging in, then you can invite another user. You can share links for invitation. You can split users into different groups. You can split them into different roles and permissions. You can control the security policy, and that's a very lean set of features that we see kind of with every product that we are using. And this is why we call it user management. Another form is like basically controlling the security policies, controlling SSO, right? If you're selling to enterprise customers, obviously if you're a B2C user, you don't care much about your organizational IDP But if you're selling to an enterprise company, that would be probably the first thing what they will do with your product after the POC phase. They will hook it up to their Okta, to their Azure AD, to any of the IDPs out there that the company is working on, in order to make sure that all the users and all the employees of the organization are sharing the same identity across all the other products that they are using.
By the way, maybe to add on top the B2B topic, there are also companies that are kind of both B2C and B2B. They have both motions, right? So you have users, but let's say if you want to display ads on the back end, you need to integrate with other businesses, etc. So that kind of even complicates the situation, right? So you can have both in the same company.
Correct. Yeah.
And Aviad, like if I continue with the authentication topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we work with customers, we see sometimes a little kind of confusion or mixes up between what is authentication and what is user management and what is tenant management, and how those things differ. Because people can say, okay, so I have like a pool of users that I create, and then I can add attributes or properties to those users. So I'm doing user management, right? So can you maybe expand on that from your experience, how you see the differences between those areas?
Yeah, sure. So the authentication layer would be basically how you authenticate into the product and how you're logging into the product. But as I mentioned, when you add what we call user management, basically, it's in the entire control plane of how the user is inviting another user, how the user is controlling which users are allowed to do what on the product. And basically, this entire idea of user management, authentication is the basis of it, but when you group users into different tenants or into different groups, then basically you are crossing the line between a simple authentication layer to a whole control plane over it. If you want, I can share a little bit on how, and even demo on how we are doing it with Frontegg.
Yeah, I think it would be great, like the demo time, right? So let's go to that.
Cool. So generally, the integration with Frontegg, I mean, because we are a user management tool for developers, obviously, the integration always starts with a piece of code. So when I say a piece of code, I mean a strictly piece of code. So we try to limit the integration to an open source library that we install. I'm here sharing like our React integration. So an open source library that is integrated through NPM to any of React for this example use case. So obviously we support Next.js, Angular, Vue.js, and vanilla JavaScript as well. But and the integration kind of looks like after signing up with Frontegg, which you basically just drop your application with the Frontegg provider. Now the idea with that thing is that this basically provides the authentication layer, okay, on top of your React application. So basically, these 3 lines of code takes care behind the scenes of everything around the authentication of your users, okay? So the idea is that once you do that, your application is good to go in terms of authentication. So I'm going to share here an application called Loud API, okay, which is basically an application that is using Frontegg behind the scenes, okay? And this is our basic login dialog on the Loud API application, okay? Now, we try to keep the code part of the integration as simple as it can in order to provide the users the ability to change basically everything around here, the behavior and the way it looks, from what we call the Frontegg building. So on the Frontegg portal, so as I mentioned, the integration starts with the code, but then you can basically change everything on how it looks like and how it behaves from the Frontegg builder. Okay? So the Frontegg builder is a way for our customers to manipulate the way that the login box looks like in just few clicks. Okay, so for example, if my product doesn't require login with Facebook, I'll just eliminate it from here, and I eliminate the Microsoft as well. I can control which kind of single sign-on I want to support for my end users, whether I want my users to log in from password, through Magic Cloud, Magic Link, sign up, to allow them to sign up or not, and even to control the link for the consensual on the user approval in terms of terms and conditions and that kind of stuff. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe at that point, I wanted also to add something and ask a question. So, especially in SaaS world, it's very important to have automation in place, right? Ideally, would like to configure everything in infrastructure as code, and of course, like visual aids help you a lot to experience the product and like get the look and feel, right? But can you tell us a bit maybe how we can automate once we are pleased with how the UI looks like, how we can put it into our source code potentially?
Yeah, so the idea with Frontegg is that so obviously everything that I do here can automatically translates into code, okay? So once I change the look and feel, for example, I'm gonna change it to that one, okay? And I'm gonna remove the Facebook. And so the idea with Frontegg is that you kinda can deploy it through a single line of code, okay? And then automatically it goes into your development environment, and then you can test it on your development environment and publish it into your production environment. And then basically with Frontegg, you kind of don't need to change the code because it's already translated into the way it looks and feels. Everything that we just did with a no-code editor can be done as well with code samples, okay? So it basically translates behind the scenes to a coding interface that you can push as part of your coding to Frontegg.
It's very important, right? Because then you can just store it together with your application infrastructure code
Yes.
and same repository, and like have repetitive deployments of your application.
So we kind of provide it like in several ways. So the no-code editor is one way that we just seen. Another way is basically, as you mentioned, to provide it as part of your application. And everything obviously here can be provided with a Terraform provider that will kind of deploy and manage the environment from behind the scenes as well.
Awesome.
Going back to the builder, okay, so it's not just the design, even the way on the defaults that your users will see is controllable from here, where multi-factor is the proper way to protect applications today. So whether you are forcing multi-factor authentication or not, whether you want to support reCAPTCHA, whether you want your users to get an email when they are logged in from another device. And the list goes on and on through a password complexity, whether you want your password meter or not, and going all the way towards session management on what would be the default for idle session timeout or not. But with Frontegg, these are the defaults because everything I just showed are authentication properties, right? But in Frontegg, what we try to do once the user is logging in is to form the defaults into what we call user management, okay? So after basically our users authenticated and they integrated the login box into their application, they have a very easy way of knowing which user is logged in and how, okay? So through a set of very easy React hooks, our customers can get the user, they can get the profile, the name, and the access token, okay? So this is a pretty straight OpenID Connect compliant JWT. And now, basically, for their backend calls, they just validate the JWT. So in Frontegg, we have several SDKs to validate the JWT on the backend. Okay, for example, on Node.js, you can just wrap specific parts of your code with a with authentication middleware that validates this JWT using the public key. You can do it for specific roles, and this is like going far beyond authentication because now you're enforcing authorization as well, either for one role or multiple roles or even by permissions. Okay. Now the way to split users into several roles is available through what we call an admin portal. So Frontegg, basically, everything that we've seen so far is authentication, but we kind of went an extra step by providing our customers with an easy way of exposing a self-serve management screens to their end customers. So once I'm logged in the Loud API, and now I'm a customer of Loud API, by a simple click, I can now manage my own account. So this is an embeddable drop-in admin portal, which is embeddable by Loud API customers, okay, Loud API developers for the Loud API customers, okay? And now the Loud API customers can now manage their own profile. They can manage their privacy and security. They can change their own password. They can onboard their own multi-factor authentication, and they can see all the logged in sessions that they are logged in from. So if I'm gonna log in from another device now, I'm gonna see another session over here. And I'll be able to log out non-active sessions.
Amazing. And by the way, here, one of the things that I think are more complex when building access permissions is roles, right? So because those are many times specific to the application, unlike the infrastructure. So I can say, okay, the user tried to access some API throughout the application. We can validate that the user is authenticated, but what can they actually do in the application? Let's say, I don't know, if I'm a designer, can I just create new designs? Or if I'm an administrator, then I can do more stuff. So how can you help model those kind of things using Frontegg? If you can talk about that a little bit.
Great. So in Frontegg, basically, the idea is that we are providing an infrastructure for creating roles and permissions on an RBAC model as well. So on the Frontegg management console, okay, our customers, developers can create roles, and they can create permissions, and they can assign different permissions to different roles. Now, every role and permission that will be created here will eventually be visible for the end users of the product on this screen. So once now a user is inviting another user through the Frontegg admin portal, they'll be able to choose roles and permissions for that specific user, okay? And these roles and permissions will be transparent for the developer because they will be part of the JWT that eventually goes to the backend and will be enforced with a code sample that I just.
So, sure. Aviad, we have a question from the chat, which I think was bound to pop up sooner or later. And the question is, how's this different from Cognito?
Cool. That's a great question. So AWS Cognito basically is obviously a great authentication and identity piece, but it does not provide what we call on a multi-tenancy out-of-the-box features for user management. So obviously just the UI that we currently look at, right? Being able to invite a user to different tenants, controlling their roles, providing them with invite links, changing the ability on a tenant level, okay, to force multi-factor. Okay, so for example, in this use case, I'm forcing multi-factor only for the tenant, only for the users of this tenant, and I'm not forcing it for other tenants. Okay, setting up granular session management on a per tenant basis, setting up login restriction on, allow or deny IP lists from specific tenants. Okay, so these are all features. When I say user management or multi-tenancy user management or B2B user management, these are the exact requirements that we get from our customers, excuse me, that are very different from other tools, great authentication tools out there. Okay, same goes for audit logs. Okay, so customer-facing audit logs on which user has logged in, creation of machine-to-machine tokens per users or per tenant basis. These are all parts of very advanced B2B use cases for B2B customers that you see more and more in the industry landscape today. So these are the main differences. Same goes for SSO configuration in Frontegg. Basically, the end customer can create their own SSO configuration, whether they are choosing SAML or OpenID Connect. They can just throw in the metadata XML over here, going over and mapping the domains to that specific SSO configuration, and going all the way of mapping groups from the IDP towards roles in the product. That kind of completes the entire SSO configuration for the end user. So you basically, the support team doesn't have to be involved in that.
Right.
You know what? Well, maybe I think it was maybe deserve qualification here. So we have Frontegg, we have the customers, your customers that use Frontegg, then we have the customers, and then we have the users. Can you maybe just clarify those, like the role of each a little bit, where they stand in this like integration chain, etc.? I think it would be really helpful for the audience.
Yeah, sure thing. So that's a great question, because when I'm interviewing a developer and I try to explain what Frontegg is, I said that Frontegg is a B2B2B company, because eventually we are a B2B company. Our customers are developers and companies that are selling to a B2B company, but eventually this admin portal, the drop-in admin portal, will be used by their customers and by their end users, okay? So eventually it goes like that. So we have the end user, which is going to authenticate and manipulate stuff on the drop-in admin portal, okay? Now this user can belong to one or many tenants, and this is how we call them on the front end. So there are tenants. When you build a multi-tenancy application, basically this screen will be available for all of the tenants of our customers, okay? And basically what happens is that on the Frontegg control panel, on the Frontegg portal, they would basically create defaults for their tenants, but then the end users and the tenants can basically override everything from the drop-in admin portal.
So essentially, let's say if I'm Load API, the company, and we use Frontegg to provide that admin portal functionality, then tenants of Load API would use that, like the end users of those tenants, if I understand correctly, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the idea. The idea is, because I started saying that we are trying to kick innovation, okay, and that sounds like high words, but instead of developers of Load API building that kind of screens, we kind of build it from them. And instead of them building the infrastructure of inviting users, thinking about tokens, when tokens need to exist, providing all the security features on allowed domains, allowed IP policy, allowed countries, per tenant basis, we kind of build it for them, but it's going to be used by their end users.
Amazing. It's a few layers of inception, but I think we're getting through that. And you know what? Actually, I think maybe we have a question another question in the chat. Maybe.
Well, I have several actually. So we're jumping back a bit to the UI builder for this first question. So you showed how to customize the UI, but the question is, can you build a totally custom UI with Frontegg?
Great question. And the answer is yeah, you can, in two different modes. Okay, so first of all, our React-based API contains set of React actions and React sagas that you can just integrate within your React application and basically just leave the UI aside and build your custom logic and your custom presentation layer on top of these actions and sagas. And if you don't want to do that, okay, so you can just omit that as well and just consume our API. So on the Frontegg documentation, we kind of try to go API first. So every API that we are using is in here, okay? For example, invite another user. So on the management, so you can see what it requires to invite another user, and then basically you can just consume this API and build your entire presentation layer on your own. That goes both for the login dialog and for the drop-in admin portal.
That's great. And then the second question was on the tokens, if they include scopes, and are they, well, do they span B2B users or specific to individual users?
Great question. So we have both of them. So tokens can be split either for personal users. Okay, so on the machine-to-machine tokens, they can be generated for my personal token. And then I'm going to inherit my roles and scopes and permissions of the tenant. Okay, so I'm a user within a tenant. I will have on the client ID and secret key, on the client credential, my set of permissions and my set of scopes on within the tenant. But another use case is that you want to generate a machine-to-machine token which is not attached to a specific user. For example, I don't know, you want to put it on your GitHub CI/CD, on your GitHub Actions, right? And you don't want to basically, when the user is leaving the organization, to generate another one. So with Frontegg, you can generate a machine-to-machine token for the organization or for the tenant, okay? And then basically you can create this token with the specific scopes that will be relevant once this token is authenticated.
Great.
So it's either from per tenant basis or per user basis.
I think what's really important to emphasize is that all of that is self-service, right? For the end users of the tenant, right? So
that's correct. All that is self-serve. Yeah. They can generate their own tokens and they can authenticate their own tokens. The idea is that, yeah, the world is going self-serve. We try to live with that, yeah.
So keep your questions coming in the chat. I think it's been way too easy for Aviad so far with easy questions. So let's up the complexity, please. No, jokes aside, this is Building SaaS on AWS. I'm Gunnar, joined today by Aviad and Alex. And we're talking about Frontegg and user management, specifically for B2B SaaS applications. So Aviad, what's next then in showing the walkthrough of Frontegg?
Yeah, so everything that we just seen is the self-served motion that you embed on your developers embed on their own application, and then basically they provide their users with a self-serve mechanism. But as we know, in most of the cases, it requires some back office operations. So we try to provide a back office operations for our end users, for our developers. So this is their back office to be able to create new accounts. Okay, so not all the companies are self-serve, right? Not all the companies allow signups. So sometimes you have to create the account before. So this is a way for the developers or for the sales engineers or for the support engineers to create accounts for their customers, to see which account is active, to see some statistics on that, and to see some reflections on which account you can exclude the company account or exclude some free email accounts, so you see only the accounts that matters. And another way is to see the users, okay? So which user is logged in and when, how many visits you have per user, so you have all the statistics here for users. And as I mentioned, Frontegg is a many-to-many relations on a user to tenant, so you can see, for example, this is the user I'm logged in with, so basically I'm part of multiple tenants, and I have different states of multiple tenants, and then I can associate or disassociate my relationship with the tenant in various modes. Same thing on the. Go ahead.
Maybe to add on that, that many functionality is very useful. So we see, let's say, situations where you have a contractor that works with several companies, and they happen maybe to use the same application that is Frontegg's customer, right? So that's a kind of easy way, I guess, to allow those use cases.
Yeah, and we try to keep it granular because in some of the use cases, the same user will be part of multiple tenants, but under different roles. So we try to keep the relationship between a user to tenant based on different permissions or different scopes or different roles and permissions in order to allow my support engineers to be support role on several accounts, but then administrators on the accounts that they are creating for themselves. So that kind of the way that we split it up. This is another thing that we try to keep and to basically differentiate us from the different tools out there.
We have a question.
Sorry, go ahead, Gunnar.
No, go ahead, Alex.
Just a clarification. So here we see account is a tenant, right? So like just
yeah,
to show
yeah. So account is a tenant, and everything. Not all the companies like to be self-serve. Some companies, are totally self-served. So they are self-driven. They have sales engineers which are serving customers, solution engineers. So in this use case, for example, for SSO connection, I can totally configure it so you have a support engineer who is trying to onboard an SSO for their customers, so they can go for an SSO configuration and they can do it on behalf of the customers without going through the self-serve motion. And then, everything around it, with the self-serve basically is available from here. So you can change the security policies, you can change the SSO configuration, the metadata, the users, everything around here is available for the support engineers as well.
Right. So I want to bring up a question from the chat on, I suppose, when you're implementing Frontegg in your front-end application, and where to store the JSON Web Token.
I think Aviad is going to love the question.
Yeah. So side note, Alex and myself had, I don't know, was it an hour, Alex, last week, where we exchange ideas? This is a great question because it's one of the most common questions on the world of authentication and how to deal with proper authentication. So storing JWTs on your local storage, I'm sure that there are several developers in Frontegg who sees this show now and they are kind of joking aside because they know it's the big no-no. We have it on the wall here. No sensitive information on local storage. So local storage obviously is exposed to what we call a cross-site scripting, XSS attacks. So once you save something like that on your local storage, basically you're exposing the information of your customers to an XSS attacks, and basically this is a big no-no. So what we have as a recommendation is to keep JWTs in memory, but that creates another issue, right? So your user is authenticated, then they refresh the screen, the memory is gone. So there comes a mix of having a refresh tokens as part of the authentication mechanism as an HTTP only cookie protected by CSRF and CORS. And that's only for the refresh tokens, where the JWT, which is generated from that refresh request, is as short as possible and stored in memory to minimize risks.
But can you maybe expand by just the names of the abbreviations you just mentioned?
Yeah, sure. So JWT is JSON Web Tokens. Obviously, that is like the most standard way today to keep authentication from several reasons. The rise first of microservices. You want your JWT in some cases passes through different hops through the way. For example, AWS API Gateway, right? One of the most common ones. If you are creating a session-based JWTs, then it means that now every hop on the way, for example, AWS API Gateway, needs to know how to decode this session. And this is why JWTs are very standard, because there are ways to sign them and the way to verify them through a set of public keys, and there is a common structure for this. When we're using refresh tokens, it's basically the way every authentication request issues the JWT token, which I'm going to be able to use with my APIs, but it's going to issue a refresh token, which going to be used for the next JWT issuing, okay? So the idea is that once we set refresh tokens on an HTTP only cookies, So cookies, we know what they means. Setting an HTTP only cookie on the browser side basically means that this cookie is protected from any JavaScript code. So essentially, it's protected from an XSS attempts, and only the browser basically sends these cookies automatically to the API that issue them. And basically, this is the way it works. But it opens another form of possible attack, which is called CSRF, which is a cross-site request forgery, because the browser doesn't know from which tab of the application this cookie was sent. It just sends it. So in order to eliminate this, several ways. First is to issue what we call a CSRF token, which is embedded within the refresh token and goes as part of the request in order, kind of a two-factor authentication on each request. And another way is to create a course headers, which is the allowed origins request to set up and to validate that the request for refresh actually arrives from a website that we trust.
It's authentication is a complex topic, so I guess it's sometimes difficult to digest. So thanks for providing those recommendations. And Gunnar, you want to say something?
No, I just want to say thanks for that as well, and that it's. I think it's important to note that this is a common question, like you said initially. This is something that I think every front end and back end developer, they are talking about these specific topics, how to deal with JWT tokens, where to store them, and so on.
I agree. It's like one of the most common one. We in Frontegg have a habit of every new tool that we are using, web tool or SaaS tool, the first maybe 10 minutes we will dedicate to understand the tool, but then 15 minutes later we would go into the local storage and we would see how secure is it, because we wanna make sure that we are using a safe tool.
By the way, we're talking about security and where to store things, right? So also in AWS we talk a lot about the shared responsibility model, right? So there are things that are responsible for security of the cloud, and the customer responsible for security in the cloud. That depends on what kind of abstraction it is, right? So how would that work with Frontegg? What pieces, say, of the authentication of the whole experience, Frontegg is responsible for, security-wise, etc. What kind of things customers or developers are responsible for?
Yeah, cool. So thanks for that question, Alex, because it is a very common question that leads and customers of Frontegg basically, they're trying to understand where the border basically passes between Frontegg and their application. So Frontegg basically takes care of the entire account management, user management, okay, so user database and account and tenant database, and everything around the authentication and security policies going to the application for that accounts. And the line is very thin when you are talking about authorization, because we are providing an RBAC model, roles-based access control. So you have roles, you have permissions, you can create as many permissions as you wish, and we know how to embed them into the authorization dialog. But then comes a question of, okay, are you dealing with feature flags? Because that's another form of authorization if you think about it, right? What a user can or cannot see and what a user can or cannot do. And do you provide so I have documents as part of my organization, and I want to protect 2 documents like that, and three documents I want to provide granular access, and all the others should be free. Kind of an attributes-based access control. So this is kind of where the line steps. So we are providing the RBAC model and every other flexibility or authorization logic on top of the authorization model needs to be custom built by the developers of the application. Another good example for this is invites or signups, right? So signups is very complex because some customers want to allow signups from different countries. Some customers want to allow signups from different domains. Some customers won't allow 2 signups on the same domain if they already had one, because they want to minimize leads. So eventually, I mean, we wanted to kind of take all the controls on Frontegg, but then we said there is only certain limit of requests that we can do. So we opened what we call a pre-hook mechanism. So a pre-hook mechanism, basically, I'll show it quickly. So a pre-hook mechanism basically allows our customers to register to a webhook, for example, for a user invite, okay, where they are able to provide a webhook call. And then basically we are notifying them whenever something is happening on our backend, because Frontegg runs on a SaaS model, and the idea is that everything is happening on our cluster, on our infrastructure. So once basically we are providing, for example, a user invite event, we are letting our developers and our customers know that a user invite is requested. Now what happens on the other side, for example, if the number of users exceeds a certain threshold, they can block the operation and return us with list of errors that eventually will be presented on the self-served UI for the customer. So everything can be, all the flows can be controlled from the backend. So we don't have basically custom logic. Custom logic resides on our customers, and basically we invoke APIs to ask them if we can carry on with the operation or not.
And that flexibility is very important. And I think I quickly saw like where you have pre-hooks, you also have webhooks, right? So can you maybe explain the difference between the functionalities?
Yeah, sure. So pre-hook, you know, the name implies it. So we will call a pre-hook before the operation is completed, and it will be a synchronized call. So we will wait for a response. We will wait for a flag whether we are allowed to continue or not. And then basically we will decide if we are continuing or not. And webhooks are basic notifications. So whenever something is happening and something is completed on the flow, so we will invoke a webhook mechanism. Let it load. For example, if you want to subscribe to a user activated event or a user authenticated event, you can just subscribe to it, and we will shoot this event as a JSON, okay? Here we have 2 events. Each and every one of them is a different schema, where the event key will always be, and you basically can just subscribe to all of the events in Frontegg and just, you know, tunnel them to your Slack channel, tunnel them to another management APIs that you have. For example, I don't know, when an account is created, you want to tunnel it to your Salesforce. So that's a good way to do that.
Yeah, but another common functionality that we see, and I'll go back to the question in a sec, where this can be useful is provisioning infrastructure for tenants that require dedicated resources, right? So let's say you can do some registration, receive that event, and then trigger some deployment automation that will provide those like silo-based deployment models. So it's really useful for that as well.
Yeah, so a question on the webhooks, if they can directly use AWS Lambda function invocations using IAM or something, well, instead of something that's publicly exposed over HTTPS.
Yeah, so first of all, there is a security mechanism over webhooks where there is a secret key, which is a pre-shared key from Frontegg to the webhooks receiver. We are now exploring several other options, including AWS Lambdas and even a serverless running of functions within the Frontegg infrastructure for this. But for now, we are allowing a pre-shared key authentication between the source and the receiver.
So we are quickly approaching top of the hour. I would love to just look a bit at the high-level architecture as well before time is running out, Aviad?
Yeah, sure. So let me pull it up. Also sharing my screen here.
Can you add it as a tab on the same window, maybe?
I'm gonna try.
You already said the technology is complex.
Let's see. No, doesn't work. Hold on. We'll do like that, and there you go. We managed to do that. Yeah. Cool.
So walk us through it, Aviad.
Yeah, so the idea, as we've seen, that Frontegg basically kind of integrates on every UI application, okay? So the integration starts from the front end, okay? So this is basically it, through set of open source SDKs, okay? And then you have kind of two flows for data to flow, okay? So the first one would be obviously from the front end components to the Frontegg cloud. And then basically, we are taking care of roles, permissions, users, tenants, security policies, all the authorization scheme and authentication scheme. So security policies in terms of which users are allowed to do what. This is on the authorization side, and the authentication scheme, which users are allowed to log in and from where. And basically, the other thing is that the application has its own logic, and the other logic basically streams through the backend of the application as any other, whether it's a microservices or monolith infrastructure. And now we have backend to backend interactions between the developer or our customers' cloud and the Frontegg cloud. Okay, so there will be API calls to create accounts, to manage audit logs, everything around, to create behind the scenes users, to fetch users, to remove users, to do user provisioning. Everything is basically running cloud to cloud on a multi-tenant basis. And what we just seen on the pre-hooks and webhooks, basically, it floats the other way around. So from the Frontegg cloud, you get a notification to our customer's cloud. Basically, this is like the entire data flow that we see.
Very cool. So, yeah, we're quickly approaching top of the hour, so maybe it's time to do a bit of a wrap up. And maybe, Aviad, you can just do a quick summary of what Frontegg, what type of problems that Frontegg solves for SaaS builders.
Sure, perfect. So Frontegg, first of all, is a user management tool. We build authentication, authorization, tenancy, and user management platform. So our customers, developers, can integrate easily, and we are really trying to focus on easily to their application in order to allow two things. First of all, to allow a multi-tenancy infrastructure on user management, to have users, to have authorization on users, to have users' relations to different tenants on different roles and permissions, and to have granular security policies, and obviously SSO connections and audit logs. And that's first of all, but then obviously to expose all of these components and infrastructure to their end users by using the Frontegg admin portal and the Frontegg self-service experience. So basically, they don't have to build this entire screens over and over again. They just use the Frontegg admin portal and have their end users get complex user management flows running.
And if one of our reviewers wants to try out Frontegg, then how do they go about that?
So frontegg.com, start for free, register. I mean, no credit card is required. Just no feature limitation. Just try it out. Our docs are open. Our platform is open for sign up. So yeah.
Self-service, did we say?
Totally. PLG and self-service, yeah.
That's great. Right. And if people have additional questions after this, Aviad, I know they can reach you on Twitter. You're on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, Twitter, LinkedIn, and there is on the bottom of our Frontegg webpage, there is a Slack community, very active one, that we have our entire developer teams talking about all this other stuff around local storage and HTTP only cookies, and can ask questions over there.
That's great. Thank you very much, Aviad, for joining us today and talking about Frontegg and the problems you're trying to help SaaS builders solve out there. And Alex, thank you very much for joining. And the same, I suppose, if people want to reach you, talk more about building SaaS on AWS, you're also on Twitter and LinkedIn.
Yeah, definitely. Very social. Thank you very much, Aviad, also for joining. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Gunnar, for having me.
Yeah,
thank you very much. Gunnar. And thanks to all the viewers for joining us. Thanks for all of the questions. They did get harder and harder throughout the episode, I believe, Aviad. So thanks for answering all of those with elegance. This has been another episode of Building SaaS on AWS. I'm Gunnar Grosch. I was joined by Aviad and Alex today. Thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.